Hey guys, I was recently playing a game against a lower rated player, and I had a position very similar to what you see on the screen right now, and I played the move queen takes g2. It's obviously attacking the rook in the corner, and my opponent played the move knight to h3. I captured the rook, and the game was basically over at this point. I just won the rook for free, and a few moves later, I won the game. But had my opponent played the move queen to f3, the game would have went on. They would have actually saved their rook because the queen defends it, and I could take the queen, but then it's just a queen trade. Yes, I did still get a pawn out of the deal, but it was just a pawn. The game was going to go on, and it's a relatively equal position. White lives to fight another day. But they weren't aware of that trick, and like I said, just ended up losing. And after that game, it occurred to me that there are actually a lot of these kind of situations in chess where it looks like something really bad is going to happen. But if you know the secret or the trick to kind of save the position, you can play that and the game goes on, right? So in this video, I'm going to give you 10 of these very specific situations where it looks like something bad just happened or something bad is about to happen. But I'm going to give you the sort of secret to defend against that and either get into a good position or at least save your position to where you can play on. So having said that, let's take a look at these 10 different situations. All right, so here's the first situation. You're playing a game and your opponent plays the move queen a5 check and you're like, oh no, I just got forked. I'm losing my bishop. I'm in trouble. And you play a move like queen d2 and they take your bishop, right? Was that the best that you could have done? No, absolutely not. So let's go back. What should we play in this position? Well, knight to c3 actually blocks the check, but at the same time, it defends your bishop and you're totally fine. The game goes on. You don't lose a piece. You're just fine, right? So I want you to remember that a lot of the times on queen to a5 check, if it's forking your king and bishop, knight to c3 is kind of a natural move that usually you will have available to defend your bishop. Now, a little bonus tip for you. Here's a position that's very similar, but a little bit different. And again, black plays queen to a5 check, and you're like, okay, I know what to do. Nelson told me this, knight to c3. Wait a minute. I don't have a knight to move to c3. I guess I'm just losing my bishop, right? Wrong. In this case, you can play the move c3. And we block the check with our pawn, and we also unleash our queen to defend the bishop on a4, right? So this is another version, depending on where your bishop is. If it's on b5 or if it's on a4, then your queen can help by just moving the pawn up, okay? So I want you to remember those two options, knight to c3 and c3, and if you ever find yourself in a fork like this, usually you can save the bishop by doing one of those two things. All right, so here's the next situation. Black's turn, and they play d4, attacking your knight, and you're like, okay, let me move my knight to safety. Wait a minute, it's pinned. I guess I'm just in trouble, and I'm losing my knight. And a lot of people in this position would play something like bishop to d2, trade, and you just lost a knight for a pawn. That's a really bad trade, and now you're in big trouble. But what you can do a lot of the times in these situations is attack that bishop with your side pawn. So in this case, it's the a pawn. It can also happen over here, and you would use the h pawn. But we simply play a3. And now if black takes our knight, guess what? We take their bishop, and we just trade it. Of course, they can take here, but we just take, and we're happy with this, right? The other thing that they could try when we attack it, they can retreat the bishop. Guess what? We attack it again. And now we kind of have the same situation. If they take our knight, we take their bishop. It's just a trade and we're happy, right? And of course, if they go back, well, now we can move our knight somewhere to safety because there's no more pin, okay? So remember, if you find yourself in a situation where one of your knights is pinned, it can happen on either side, and your opponent pushes a pawn forward and it looks like you're about to lose a piece, usually you can save the piece by doing something like this, okay? So keep that in mind. Pretty common, and that's going to save you, more often than you realize. All right, here's the next situation, and this one should look familiar, but black plays queen takes g2, and we're like, oh no, our rook is trapped. I guess we're losing our rook, and we have to do something, and that's just too bad, right? No, wrong. Remember, queen to f3, okay? It's defended by the knight, so you don't have to worry about that. And this is defending your rook. So if black tries to take your rook, you're just going to take their queen, right? So a lot of times when your rook is stuck in the corner like this, the only way to defend it is with a diagonal piece. Usually it's your queen or your bishop like this, okay? And this could also happen if you imagine if your bishop was on e2, you could also play bishop to f3 to defend your rook that way, okay? So remember this, you don't have to lose your rook, just play queen f3. Yes, you still lost a pawn, which is not great, but it's a lot better than losing an entire rook. All right, the next situation is very similar. Notice it's almost the same position, except this time our knight has already been developed. So now black takes on g2. we have to move our rook somewhere, right? Because our rook's still being attacked. And sometimes people will play the move rook to f1 here. This is really a bad choice, okay? What you want to do if this ever happens is play rook to g1, because you gain a tempo on the queen, you chase the queen around, and usually the queen only has one place to go, h3. And sometimes you could even follow that up by getting some more attacks on the queen. So for example, rook to g3, chasing the queen around, right? And we just got, our rook kind of activated into the game. Yes, we lost the pawn, which maybe wasn't worth it, but a lot of times you'll be in a decent position if you do this, okay? So remember, if the queen ever comes down and takes that pawn, usually you can just slide your rook over. It can also happen here. One thing I want to point out, you do have to make sure that your knight is defended for this to work. So right now, the queen is defending the knight. If that's not the case, you might have to try to find another solution. Otherwise, you might just be losing your knight. But in this case, it is defended, so rook g1 works just fine. Okay, so keep that in mind. This is a nice way to get some tempos with your rook on the queen, and a lot of times that can counteract the fact that you lost a pawn. Sometimes you can even follow it up with knight to g5. Depending on what you're attacking over here, you might actually have some type of a fork, right? So keep all those things in mind. All right, so here's the next situation. You're playing the game and black plays the move queen to d1 check, slams it down on the board, and you're like, oh man, I'm in trouble. I'm getting checkmated. Because if I take the queen, the rook's going to take me, and that's it. I'm just done for. So you resign because you think you lost. Was that the correct choice? No, not the correct choice. Why is that? Whenever you have this back rank threat like this, okay, and you can't take the piece because then the other piece is coming in, what you can sometimes do is block this check with another piece. And in this example, our rook over here on e7 can actually just come back and we prevent the checkmate, because if the queen tries to take it, guess what? This rook is now involved and we just actually won black's queen if black does that. So this is an idea that a lot of people forget about. They forget that if you have some other piece, you can swing it back. You don't have to just immediately take that piece, because then you do lose, right? Because if you take it first and now try to come back, it's too late. It just doesn't have that extra rook defending, okay? So you have to do it right away before you make any trades, because you need this guy to defend it. And black's rook now doesn't really play a role until you just kind of have your two rooks against black's queen and you're okay, all right? So that's a good technique to remember to defend against the back rank checkmate. Also, a little bonus tip here. Be careful when you get to the end of the game like this. Sometimes it's wise to push one pawn forward to give your king a little escape route, right? So that if something like this happens, you can always just run away with your king. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, this rook blocking idea is really good to keep in mind. All right, so here's the next situation. It's white's turn, and they play the move queen to e2, attacking our knight, and we start to look around. Okay, let's move our knight back. Wait a minute. Everything is covered. Wait a minute. Our knight's trapped. We're losing our knight. We can't go anywhere, right? Wrong. So if you find yourself in a situation like this where it's being attacked by a queen or another piece, maybe a bishop or something, you can play like d5 to defend it. And even though there's en passant to take our pawn, whenever this happens, now you can recapture with your knight and you save your knight, because that pawn, which was kind of restricting your knight's movement, is gone, right? And so this, just keep that idea in mind. Sometimes it also works with the other pawn. So like f5, same kind of a deal. If they en passant, you can take. So depending on the situation, keep that in mind. It's a good way to save a knight that maybe, got a little bit overextended and it looks like it's trapped. Probably you can do this and save it. All right, so here's another situation. It's black to play. They play the move knight to b4, and let's just say, hypothetically, you didn't see this, okay? You were focused on something else. You played g4 to attack the bishop, and you didn't see that they could just take this pawn. So they take it, and you're like, great, I'm done for. I'm losing my rook. I'm just completely lost. You're thinking about resigning. You're not sure. What I want to remind you of is a lot of the times when this kind of stuff happens, you can usually get two pieces for your rook. So how does this work? King to d2, okay? They take your rook. You can take the bishop now, right? And let's just say they take you back. And what do you notice about this knight? It's trapped, right? It can't actually escape. And so what we can do is say, okay, I'm going to come over here with my king and take it, or even just move this bishop and take it with my rook because it's trapped. And if you can accomplish that, so let's just say you play bishop d3 and black, I don't know, does something, and you take it, you ended up getting a knight and a bishop for a rook and a pawn, right? Which is actually not a bad trade at all. I would say you're in the lead now. I think the two pieces is better than the rook and the pawn. So what I want you to remember is even if you ever find yourself getting forked by a knight like this, you always want to kind of ask yourself, okay, at the end of this fork, can I get that knight at least? And then maybe if you can get another piece, like in this case, the bishop, and you actually come out on top. Okay, so keep that in mind. The fact that after the knight takes it, as long as you kind of plan for that, that's why we moved king to d2 and not like king to e2, right? Because if we would have went to e2, let's say, and the knight takes, we take, well, now the knight's just going to escape on us, and we don't get it, right? So it's important that we played. Both of these really work. I like d2 a little bit better, but it's important that you keep that in mind. You got to keep it trapped, okay? And as long as you get the knight, you should be doing okay. All right, so speaking of knights being trapped, here's another example for you. So we're playing this game against black, and black plays the move knight to b4, and they're feeling pretty clever about themselves because they just forked their pawns, and they're thinking, hey, look at that, I'm going to win a pawn, right? What you can do when this kind of situation happens is you can play c3. And why are we playing c3? Well, the reason is if black takes this, which by the way is a big mistake, we can again trap the knight by playing king to d1. And notice how the pawns are kind of stopping these two squares from the knight. And so then all you have to do is somehow stop this square with another one of your pieces. A lot of times there's a rook back there, or in this case, it's our king, right? And the knight is just stuck. The knight can't go anywhere. And so black can do whatever they want. We're going to come over with our king. And guess what? Once we get here, that knight is trapped. Worst case or best case for black, they have to give it up for here. And the knight is gone. We're probably going to be able to win this endgame now. So going back, sometimes you can just let the knight take that pawn. As long as you're able to play c3, there's a very good chance that that knight is going to be trapped. Okay, and you can see how it's different than if we play a3, because now the knight takes here, and this is much more difficult to trap the knight here because it has a lot of places, right, that it could potentially go to. So you have to do it correctly and play c3, and then you just go over there and get yourself a free knight. Okay, so keep that one in mind. All right, and the next situation is actually very similar. You notice this position is almost the same, but I've swapped black's knight for a bishop. And let's just say that they take this pawn. What do you think my recommendation is going to be for what we can do? That's right, we're going to play b3, and we're going to trap the bishop. And notice it can't go anywhere. It can go here, but then our king just comes over, and guess what? We're going to trap it, right? And eventually, we're going to come here over here and just take it. We just want a piece, okay? So same idea, except, you know, the way that you trap it is obviously different depending on if it's a knight or a bishop that takes your pawn, but keep that in the back of your mind. Now, a little bonus tip for you here. Let's just say, for the sake of example here, we're playing black, we capture the pawn, and white plays b3 on us. We're like, oh no, this is what Nelson said, now my bishop is gone, right? Wrong. If this happens to you, don't panic. What you wanted to do is immediately start pushing this pawn down. And why do I say that? Because if we can get here right away and force white to capture us, guess what? Then our bishop's going to be able to escape. Okay, so for example, a5, white's coming over to trap it, right? a4, and notice now, well, first of all, if white takes us, we're fine. Our bishop can survive, so that's great, right? We saved our bishop. But if white, let's say, goes here to try to continue trapping us, well, now we can just take. And if white does this, they lost too many pawns, right? We take here, and then we're about to get a queen, and they don't have time to take our bishop. They can take our pawn, but still, our bishop's fine. We actually got all of white's pawns in the process. So if that happens to you, remember, start pushing that pawn, okay? Now, depending on where the king is, you might not have time, but in this example, you would have time because the king needs 3 moves to get over there, and you have, 2 moves and you're ready to go. So just, some tips there regarding trapped bishops. Definitely something you want to think through before you take the pawn, right? Like if white's king was sitting over here on c1, absolutely I would not take that because, of course, I'm just going to get trapped. So those are the things you want to, keep in mind. Okay, so the last situation I have for you is this position right here. It's white to play, and they hit us with the stunning move, bishop takes f7 check. And as we sort of try to figure out what's going on, we notice that if we take the bishop, it lures our king away, and then white's queen is going to come down and take our queen for free. And so we kind of have a moment of panic, and we're like, well, let me try to go to e7 to defend my queen. And then white hits us with bishop g5. And we're toast. We are absolutely toast. We lose the queen. We're losing the game. Everything is just, that's it. So what do we do wrong? Well, There's a little trick here, okay? First of all, this is a nice tactic to be aware of if you haven't seen this before. You sacrifice the bishop to lure the king away so that your queen can take. So whenever you have tension between the queens and your bishop is lined up, keep that in mind. But here's what I want you to remember. If this happens to you, okay, takes, sometimes, depending on the position, but in this case it works, you've got a rook lined up with the queen. So if we could take advantage of that somehow, and actually we can, bishop to b4 check unleashes our rook and it's check with the bishop. So if white just blocks our bishop, we take the queen, right? We get our queen back. The only other thing they could do is block with the queen, but again, we still take it. We still get our queen back. Yes, we lost the pawn. Yes, white's probably a little better here, but the game goes on, right? You still have a fighting chance, and it's not like immediately over when you lose your queen. So keep that in mind, a little discovered check idea there with the bishop and, you know, to get the rook to come over to save your queen. So, yeah, that's what I have for you there. All right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed those 10 different ways to kind of save the position, even though it looks like it might be really bad. A lot of times you do have tricks to get out of it. I'll see you over here in this video where I present you with 3 positions and you have to choose which one is the winning position. But as always, stay sharp, play smart, and take care.